so it's an open source product you can self-host. And so that really gives organizations full control over their data. Slack recently limited, really rate limited API access to your organization's messages. So, for example, folks who want to, I don't know, hook up an LLM to summarize their Slack messages outside of that app, um, they aren't able to do that very well because you can just the rate limits don't allow it. With Zulip, that's just from what just philosophically, we really think of your organization's message history, or just your data is yours.
Last week, I sat down with Alya Abbott, who's Chief Operating Officer of open source team chat application Zulip. She told me how Zulip is different from the main competitors like Slack and Teams, how Zulip competes in a crowded market, and why organizations might consider deploying an application like Zulip in the first place. So please enjoy the conversation. Hi, Alya. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
I am very good, thank you. Thanks for joining us. So could you tell us a little bit about who you are and the story of how you joined Zulip and what led you to want to work with the mission of building this open source chat platform?
Yeah. So I've spent much of my career working in the space of how people work together and remote work. And that's something I care deeply about because if you think about how most of us spend our time, a huge amount of that time is spent at work in one way or another. And giving people better ways to work together, giving people opportunities to work remotely, maybe work with people across the world, is, I think, really just makes a really big difference to people's lives. So Zulip is a product that helps people communicate better, collaborate better, no matter where they are, whether or not they're in the same time zone. So that's something I just think is just a very meaningful thing to be working on.
Okay. So how long has Zulip existed and what was the state of team chat when the product was first launched?
Yeah, so the product has a long history. We actually just celebrated our 10-year anniversary as an open source project. So yeah, a lot has changed in that time, but the sort of gap that folks saw when starting Zulip is just how chat has other chat products. You find that there's advantages and there's really major disadvantages to communicating on team chat. So the really nice aspect of any kind of team chat product you use is the sort of real-time nature, the dynamic collaboration. It's really lightweight. Compare sending like a quick note to your coworker versus feeling like sitting down to write an email. You feel like you have to really compose it. You really have to. There's a lot of kind of overhead of greetings and goodbyes, and it really adds friction to how people collaborate. It's going to take even just you can't go back quickly back and forth. It's not real time. So chat solves that, but other chat products that folks might be familiar with have a big downside of they really don't do as well when you're not there. Folks are not all online at the same time, not all discussing something at the same time. Right. They really fall short if you have to look back on something later and try to figure out what happened, what that conversation was. So, people end up having to maybe have a chat conversation and then summarize it in an email. And it's a lot of overhead. And the innovation that Zulip brings is you get the best of both worlds. You get both that really light, dynamic nature of chat interactions when you want that, but also the more your chat history becomes a reference for you. You can have conversations that are not synchronous and not worry about people missing your messages, not have things get lost among other conversations. And so kind of bringing the advantages of kind of both types of communication together is really where that difference lies.
Right. Okay. So one of the features that I think Zulip promotes as a differentiator is that it's the only team chat with full topic threading. So how does that model change how teams communicate, and why does it matter in the real world?
Yeah. So I just talked a little bit about the why. So the topic-based threading is sort of the how. And basically the way that Zulip works is whenever you start a conversation, you give it a brief topic, like similar like you would write a subject of an email. And it's a little bit of extra work when you're writing your message, but if you think about it, people read messages a lot more than they write them. So maybe you send a message and then 20 other people read it. And so this little bit of extra work at the beginning actually gives you a much nicer experience of reading messages. So when you come to Zulip, you can get a view that's very similar to an email inbox of here are the conversations that are happening and that I haven't read yet. And then you can decide, okay, this is a thread I need to look at now. This is something maybe this one I need to look at later. Maybe this one I don't care about at all, so I'll just mark it as read or mute it so it doesn't invade my space anymore. And so you can really prioritize where your attention is going. You can, and then when you're reading your messages, you generally would read them one conversation at a time. So you're not seeing like a channel where maybe people were talking about one thing and another thing, and then those conversations kind of intersected, and now you're talking about both at once. Or maybe one of the conversations went into a side thread, and I have to remember to check there and see what's going on. It's really organized in the way that is the most natural for communication. So you know what each conversation is about, and then you read one conversation at a time. And Zulip also gives you tools to move messages between conversations, so you can really keep everything organized. You can move messages between channels, which I think is something that you don't normally see in other chat products, as well as between conversations.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I've found that at least with teams, a lot of organizations only use the chat, and it just becomes like a bottomless pit of messages that goes on for many years, and you can't really understand what it is people are talking about without either summarizing it or searching through that conversation. So although I know that Teams is kind of slowly starting to change the way they implement channels so that there's not that kind of context switching, and they've added basic threading, I think. But it's still a bit of hard work to get people to move away from that. We're just going to use this like WhatsApp kind of thing.
Our views on just talking in the way that feels most natural in Zulip creates a knowledge base for you, sort of just automatically by virtue of the conversations being organized.
Right. So it's a pretty crowded market out there. We've got Teams, which obviously probably dominates that space. Then you've got the more geeky IT nerd Slack, if I can put it like that. And things like Discord as well, even. So what really, what else really differentiates Zulip from those products? Maybe there's some other small features you can mention that would make me think, I want to give Zulip a try.
Yeah, well, I think one really major thing that differentiates Zulip is that so it's an open source product you can self-host. And so that really gives organizations full control over their data. Some of these other products you mentioned they view your conversations as their data and something that they can they have control, and it's just by virtue of being in the cloud, but also just the attitude some of these companies have taken. They view it as their data they control. For example, Slack recently limited really, really rate limited API access to your organization's messages. So, for example, folks who want to, I don't know, hook up an LLM to summarize their Slack messages outside of that app, they aren't able to do that very well because just the rate limits don't allow it. Um, and with Zulip, that's just philosophically, we really think of your organization's message history, or just your data is yours. Not we're just provide. We have a cloud hosted offering where we can help you. You don't need to do the IT work for that. We have a self-hosted offering where you can really we can set it up. We don't even see that data, right? And then we give you tools to migrate in either direction. So if you change your mind about whether you want to self-host or want to be in the cloud, you can always move. You can always export your data. And so we really think that it's super important for folks to have control over their own data.
Right. So imagine I'm an IT pro and I want to deploy Zulip in my own private cloud. Could you talk a little bit about what might be the, operational challenges? What are the best practices? What about architecture for monitoring and scaling? How does all that kind of fit together?
Yeah, so the main thing I would say, rather than getting too much into the weeds, is that we work really hard to provide really clear, really detailed documentation for folks. So if you're comfortable managing products, then, and doing IT administration, then you should find it really easy to follow that documentation, and it's all versioned with a server version, so you won't be reading something you're like, oh, that command's got renamed. It's always very clear what you're looking at. And in general, just our approach to maintaining that documentation is, I guess, there's a couple of ways that we can also help you, which are important to know about. One is that folks can drop by the Zulip development community and just ask questions. And what oftentimes somebody will ask a question and we'll answer it, but then we'll be like, oh, and the reason that we're asking that question is because there's something a little unclear in that documentation, or maybe there's a subset that should have been automated for them. And so then we'll go ahead and change that for everybody so that question doesn't come up anymore and nobody else stubs their toe in that. And so so that's how we're really able to make that process as smooth as possible for folks. And then we do offer paid support services as well for anybody who has a more complex deployment or just wants to just have the confidence that they'll be able to solve any problem with our help.
Okay. So are there any kind of silly mistakes that you see IT teams making on a regular basis when they try to deploy Zulip in a private cloud?
Yeah, I mean, maybe one thing I would say is that sometimes we see folks choosing a more complex architecture than they really need. So I think that goes back to just really thinking very carefully about what your actual requirements are. And then just choosing something that satisfies those requirements without going overboard, and without choosing something that's going to be more complex to maintain and manage and upgrade when you don't need it.
Right. So less is more sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you've got a really active open source community behind Zulip. So how do you maintain the momentum in that community and things like governance and quality, while allowing people to still contribute?
Yeah, so there's no 30-second answer to that, because it's actually we've built up that community and the processes around taking community contributions over the course of many years, and it's a gradual process. But there's sort of a few different ways that we think about it. So one is we provide, I mentioned documentation before. It's kind of a thing with us. So we provide really detailed guidelines for contributors for how to communicate effectively what their contributions are and make them really easy to review. So, or as easy as they can be, given the complexity of the work. So this is both just really process stuff, you've shown up to a project, like how do you get started? What do you do? And then just, detailed guidelines on like what should a pull request look like? What kind of commit structure should you have? What kind of commit messages should you have? And really very, very detailed and specific, and really walking you through things. And I think for a lot of folks, that actually really helps make our project more accessible and more something that, if you, maybe this is your first time contributing to open source and you're not really sure, like what are the dynamics around that. It's a really good way to get started, because as long as you're somebody who's willing to take the time to read what we've written and really try to understand it, it makes it really, really easy to get started. And then another sort of big piece of how we do things is we have an open source, like our chat for our open source community, which is on Zulip, as you might expect. And it's a really nice space for folks to get a little more help, to ask questions, to discuss technical decisions, to discuss product decisions. And that also really makes it much easier for folks to contribute. And then, as you mentioned, there's a question of quality. And for that, we have a really thorough review process. Most pull requests from community members will go through several stages of review by different folks focusing on different things. So yeah, lots to talk about there, but that's kind of the high level.
Okay, great. So what if I wanted to migrate from Slack or Teams? Is there any easy way to do that from the IT pros point of view? And from the user's point of view, what are the biggest challenges from changing from, let's say Teams to Zulip?
Yeah, great question. So we have, I guess for Slack in particular, and for several other tools, we have import tools. So you can actually move your organization history over to Zulip, move all your user accounts, your messages, everything. We're currently, the tool for Teams is actually currently under development, since Microsoft only in the past year or so has added an export tool that's designed for import into other tools. We actually wrote a blog post about the challenges with actually getting to use that tool. It took us about a month from when we requested access to that tool to when we were actually able to get an export. But that aside, if you can get an export, we're working on a tool to import that for you. So that's one kind of on the IT side. And there's also other things we've done to make it easier. So for example, for integrations, our webhooks, we have a Slack compatible webhook format. So basically all you would do to move your Slack integrations over is you would go in and change the URL and that integration is sending data to, and now that you'll see that directly in Zulip. So trying to make it super easy for folks.
Right. Okay.
And then on the user side, I would say a couple of things. So one is, I think it's really valuable to, when you're thinking about moving to Zulip, really think about, okay, for example, if you're using this tool for work, you'll be on it, maybe several hours every day. So it's totally worth it to take a bit of time to get to know the product. There's a lot of things that will be familiar if you've used other team chat tools, but some things will be different. And it's just really worth taking this, giving yourself space and getting to know it. And I think it's worth it for organizational leaders to educate folks about, what is this new product? Why are we moving to it? What makes it, what's the same, what's different, and what are going to be our best practices about how we as an organization want to use it. So one example I can give of what's a little different between Zulip and some other chat tools is, because of you have topics within each channel, you have kind of an extra level of organization. Often that means you don't need to create nearly so many channels as you would in another tool, because the channels just become kind of the definition for mostly sort of the overall purpose or sort of who's going to be there. But for example, if you have a team that has 5 different projects, you don't need 5 channels, one for each project, and then folks are trying to figure out, oh wait, where was that channel? I can't even find it. Now you just have one channel for your team, and maybe you have a few topics for each of these projects, and that can work really well. So just thinking about like how you're going to take advantage as an organization of what Zulip provides you, and what practices you're going to have around that.
Right, got it. So one of the things, obviously Teams is well integrated into Microsoft 365. If an organization decided to move over to Zulip, should they need to worry about losing those integrations, or does Zulip plug into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem somehow, or how does that work?
Good question. So I would say I think Zulip isn't part of that ecosystem in the same way, so it will be a little bit different. We do offer, we have like over 100 native integrations, and then we integrate with other products through Zapier and other kind of platforms. So I would really think about which of these integration, and also I guess as another piece is that we have a framework where it makes it very, very doable to write your own integrations as well. And so
right.
I would just say think about which of these like ways of integrating with other products actually really important for folks' workflows, and because sometimes you say, oh, everything is a platform, everything is integrated, but maybe those connections aren't really what's important about how people are using the platform.
Yeah. You mentioned the Slack API, that they had slowed down access to that quite recently. And, if you were putting, let's say, Zulip into a private cloud, you could connect it to an LLM to, summarize chats or whatever. So is there anything built into Zulip in terms of artificial intelligence, or is that something that you kind of have to control yourself and add on to it, if you like?
So currently it's primarily for you to control, and I would say a couple of things about that. One is that we have just a framework for writing bots that makes it very easy to do that, and we have customers who have written their own connections to LLM bots. And the other piece is that with the way that Zulip organizes information by topic, it's actually much easier to give a bot a coherent context window for whatever you're trying to do. So rather than just dumping everything on it and hoping it figures out what's relevant and what's not, you're like, okay, this is the context we're in. This is what's relevant. So that really helps you get like better quality results from an LLM. And in general, kind of moving forward as we add more LLM tools into Zulip, we're really taking the approach that it's all going to be very much opt-in, because I know very different kinds of people and organizations just have very different perspectives on whether that's something they'd love to have in their workflows or if it's something that's going to drive them crazy. So it's going to be all opt-in, both at the organization level and then also at the individual level.
Right. Have you got any customer success stories, if you don't need to name the customer, of course, that you could share with us? Some really, interesting deployments, or maybe large-scale deployments?
Yeah, I can share a fun one that we did a case study with recently, so I can share the name as well.
Okay.
So,
great.
So it's a startup called Windborne Systems, and what they do is they are building a better way to predict the weather, which involves launching balloons all over the world to measure wind currents. And so it's just a very fun combination of, on one hand, they're using Zulip to discuss like cutting edge algorithms, and they're really, really getting into like deep technical conversations on the chat platform. And then operationally, they're coordinating these deployments all over the world, like flying to Africa, flying everywhere, and working with contractors to run send these balloons into the upper atmosphere, and onboarding all their processes, basically like prototype and do the initial versions on Zulip. So Zulip is like their operations management platform until they really like productize it, and really lightweight to experiment. And so they're bringing folks like onto Zulip who are, everywhere and doing all kinds of interesting things. So, yeah, so I think it's a really fun one, and you can find the case study on our website if you're curious.
Great. So things are changing a lot at the moment in the IT space, primarily because of artificial intelligence, I guess. So where do you see the future of team chat, let's say in 5 years' time, with AI, open standards, all this kind of thing, or maybe something that I haven't mentioned?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for all of us, it's a little bit tricky right now to predict the future of where that technology is going.
Yes.
Like even if you see what the leaders in the field are saying, their predictions vary quite a lot about how they see it. I think the most sort of, from my perspective, the most likely, but also the scenario where tools like Zulip are going to be the most relevant is where, for a long time yet, we have like collaboration between humans and artificial intelligence who are like working together. And I think, as long as people are trying to communicate with each other with tools, chat is just a really natural and really, like really organic way to do that. And so I think tools like Zulip, or maybe Zulip itself, can become, really a hub for communication between, both humans, as it primarily is today, but also what any kind of like collaboration with AI.
Yep. So if there, were just a few things, a checklist for IT organizations they're considering deploying Zulip or recommending Zulip, what are the top, 3 things that they should consider?
Yeah, so I would say one thing is, when you think about how people are spending their time at work, communication is just a huge fraction of that. And I think what we see is often folks are reluctant to try something new or try something different because, I don't know, maybe they're using like a tool from a established vendor or from a vendor everybody has heard of, and that's kind of the default. And what I would say is it's really worth it to explore other options. So one piece of that is, okay, imagine like every employee is spending, I don't know, 1 to 3 hours a day in this product. Just think, Zulip, we've seen, makes folks a lot more efficient at communication. So even if you save 15 minutes a day for each person, that's huge. That's massive. And so I think like one thing I would say is that just be really aware of like how valuable people's time is and how products that use that time well can really help your organization across the board.
Okay.
Yeah, I think another piece that we touched on a little bit is the sort of data privacy, data sovereignty piece. I think that's something that's going to be, as we've been talking about AI, and in that world of AI, lots of companies want to take your data and use it for their own purposes. It becomes like a thing that they think of as their asset. And for us, and especially, with any kind of self-hosted tool and in general for how we view it, your data is not our asset, your data is yours, and we're just providing you a platform. And so I think that's going to be something that kind of like control of information, data control over data is going to be a big growing concern for folks. And that's a couple of things. I don't know if you want a third, but
that's a good place to start. So, okay. So, lastly, if there was one thing you could, I don't know, wave your magic wand over in the way people use online team chat today at work, what would be the first thing that you would fix?
Well, I think one thing that we haven't touched on directly that Zulip really makes a difference for is we've talked about this real real-time nature of chat, but that can also be really disruptive if you're trying to focus. And so you're sitting there and trying to like wrap your head around some tough problem, and somebody's pinging you with a question, and
Yes.
maybe it's not even an urgent question. Maybe it's just a question they'll be fine having answered in a couple hours, but you might, you're seeing those notifications, you might be worrying that, oh, like if I don't answer it now, it's going to be hard to find later. And just in general, I think on a lot of chat tools, there's a culture of kind of like DMing and mentioning and being like really like asking for people's attention right now, even when it's not needed. And Zulip helps create a culture where you just don't need to do that, where yes, you have options to like DM people and mention people if there's something that is really is urgent. But most conversations, you can count on people to read their messages and follow the channel and be able to figure out what's going on later when it's the right time for them. And so you just don't have to interrupt your coworkers all the time in order to have a conversation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So if everything is better organized, it's much less likely that things are going to get lost somewhere in that endless
exactly.
chain of communication. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned some paid support options. How is that then licensed if an organization wanted to pay for that?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. So first, just to say briefly, we do provide a cloud-hosted offering. So that's actually a great way to like check out Zulip if you're curious, because it takes under a minute or two to make a new organization in the cloud, play around with it. And then for folks who self-host, there's a couple of offerings. So one piece is that we provide access to mobile push notification service. So the way that the rules work for app stores for both Android and iOS, when you have an app in the store, all the notifications to that app have to come from a single server. So we offer a service for folks who are self-host, where their server will bounce notifications to our server that will then send it on to the app for their users. So that's one service that we offer, and that's very popular. And then another piece is support. And so that's very much, there's a business plan that's our standard offering, or there's an enterprise plan if you just want to let us know what you're looking for, and then we'll be able to say how we can provide that. So the product itself is open source, and you can run it without talking to us, which is a great way to get started. But then if you're really going to operate like use it in production and operate it for your, it's a critical service for your organization, right? You don't want chat to be down for a few hours while you figure out what's wrong. So
sure.
We're happy to help there.
Okay, great. So where can people find out more about Zulip?
Well, you can go to zulip.com, our homepage. That's a great way to check it out. And then also we really encourage folks to drop by the Zulip development community at chat.zulip.org. And that's not just for developers, it's for everybody who wants to be involved with the project in any way. And also just, we love to get feedback from anybody who's trying it out. And we're also happy to answer questions. So it's just a really collaborative space for anybody who wants to participate.
Okay, great. I didn't ask, and I should have asked earlier, is Zulip something that works in the browser or as an application I need to download, or is it both?
It's both, yeah. So there's desktop apps, and or you can use it in the browser. There's apps for Android and iOS, and there's even a terminal app for those who like to do it that way.
Right. Okay. Great. Got it. Well, it sounds like you've covered a lot of bases there. I'm quite interested to have a look at how Zulip works because, I mean, I like Teams. I don't mind Slack, but they definitely have some frustrations, that's for sure, in terms of being able to, organize information and find stuff again. That's definitely for sure. Okay, well, thank you very much for taking the time to share that information about Zulip with us. I'm guessing that there are many listeners who may not have heard of the product, so it's always interesting to have another option. So thank you, Alya, very much for your time today.
Thank you very much for the thoughtful questions. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching today's episode. And we'll see you all again soon.